Hi Year 9 and welcome to this 12th lesson in this series of videos on Jekyll and Hyde. Welcome back to another week. So last week we looked at a summary of themes, but this week we're going to go into a bit more detail on each of those themes in the book. So we're going to start today with the Gothic. Okay, so the Gothic. Gothic literature began in 1764 with the publication of Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto. This pioneering text features murder, mayhem, and supernatural figures. Almost 3 decades later, Anne Radcliffe made the genre popular. Her novels, including The Mysteries of Udolpho in 1794, were wildly successful. Jane Austen lovingly parodied the genre in her novel Northanger Abbey in 1817. Other Gothic novels from the 19th century introduced characters that still endure today, including Frankenstein's monster from Mary Shelley's 1818 novel and Count Dracula from Bram Stoker's 1897 novel. So I'll give you a couple of seconds just to pause the video if you need to in order to make notes. And now we can move on to our second slide, which is monstrosity. So one of the main themes of the Gothic is monstrosity, meaning that it introduces characters, usually villains, who are inhuman or abnormal in some way. Frankenstein's creature, for example, is a revitalised amalgamation of dead body parts, and Dracula is of course a vampire. Stevenson presents Hyde as a degenerate, meaning subhuman. In the late 19th century, many worried about the degeneration of the human race, which they traced to criminals and even prostitutes. Hyde satiates his desires without thinking of their consequences. He represents a part of society that has regressed rather than progressed. One way to think about Hyde's regression is to note that he is literally smaller than Jekyll. It is as if he has shrunk both physically and mentally. The Dr. Jekyll has transformed into the brute Hyde. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of seconds if you need to pause the video. And now we can move on to narrative experimentation. So this could be another subheading in your notes. All right then, so another staple of the Gothic was a focus on narrative experimentation. Many, if not most, Gothic novels tried to present themselves as authentic documents found during some sort of excavation or inquiry. This effect erases the author from the text. Frankenstein, for example, is a series of embedded narratives told by Robert Walton, Victor Frankenstein, and the creature. Since there is no third-person narrator, the text seems like a true story. Jekyll and Hyde at first unfolds through a customary third-person narrator, but eventually the narrator disappears in favour of two first-person accounts, letters from Hasty Lanyon and Henry Jekyll. Since the narrator never returns, readers are left without a voice to draw everything together and to provide answers. So this is a really important point. Okay, so we'll move on to the next part, which is ambiguity. So one final Gothic theme that Jekyll and Hyde explores is ambiguity. The conclusions of both Frankenstein and Dracula are decidedly ambiguous. Readers don't know for certain whether the villains are truly dead. When Gabriel Utterson breaks into Jekyll's lab, he sees the dead body of Hyde dressed in Jekyll's clothes. The letter from Jekyll details his experiment and indicates that he has lost control over Hyde. So the question remains whether Jekyll has ended his own life or whether Hyde is the culprit, the murderer. Readers will never know because the text concludes with Jekyll's letter. Who killed whom? That is the question. Okay, so when you're just making notes on that, I'm just going to give you a quick lesson summary. So, Robert Stevenson's text was first published in 1886. It is a Gothic text, meaning that it explores dark themes of the natural and the supernatural. Jekyll and Hyde participates in and furthers the Gothic themes of monstrosity, narrative experimentation, and ambiguity, and remains a classic of the genre. Okay, well, thanks for listening, and let me know if you've got any questions.